I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio by the songwriter Eddie Capone, who's here to talk about the black leader Marcus Garvey and the legacy trust that bears his name. Well, it's being launched today and it coincides with the 100th anniversary of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and the African Communities League that were founded by Garvey. As well as honouring his work as a human rights activist, the Legacy Trust is aiming to raise $1 million to erect 3 bronze statues in Marcus Garvey's memory. Before we hear from Eddie, let's listen to an excerpt from Marcus Garvey's 1924 Know Yourself speech.
Look around you. See the smiling pictures of nature, the beautiful hedges, the wonderful mountains, the wonderful vegetation all around. But because of your disposition to each other, you live in suffering, in want, in penury, and in debt. You lack the gentle touch of nature, love for each other. You hate yourselves. Black men, and what is wrong with you? Why have you no affection for yourselves? Could I hope to see you living among yourselves as the people I've spoken of? Living in charity, love, and in sympathy with each other? It can be done. I wonder if you will adapt that course. Isn't it easier to enjoy prosperity than to live in ignorance and darkness? Why select the worst out of nature? Nature never gave pain, suffering, and death to the world. It was man himself who selected death, pain, and sorrow.
Eddie Capone, that's a very striking speech. It's the first time that I've heard it, possibly not the first time that you've heard it, but what do you feel when you listen to that?
Sent shivers down my spine. He was a very passionate man, and he really, truly believed in the aspirations of black people, and he just find it absolutely unacceptable the way that black people throughout the world were being treated. But more to the point, his human rights passion was global.
I mean, you can certainly pick up the passion in that speech, but also a sense of frustration at the black community of the time being very accepting of their lot.
Yeah, and that's his thing, you know. We really have to move. You cannot roll over and let people tickle your tummy, you know. It is not acceptable, you know. There are so many things that he is trying to do, but what I find remarkable about him, he wasn't just talking about saying, well, get off your backside and don't just accept your lot, but actually laying out a blueprint, you know, a map. This is what you need to do. This is how you can do it. This is how we can really make a difference. And he was really encouraging people to really pull together.
Were people receptive to the message? How was it viewed by his contemporaries?
In places like Atlanta, he certainly made a difference. In Harlem, he certainly made a difference. And he was making a difference around the world because he had somewhere in the region between 6 and 8 million followers around the world, in the 4 corners, in Eastern Europe, in China, in South America.
So he was actually influencing movements that were not connected to the black community, but
Absolutely.
People actually found a resonance in this image of self-sufficiency and an ability to change the world, to fight for your rights as an indigenous group.
Yes. Any poor people he really had a passion for. And, you know, many believe this is some of the things that Mao Zedong really latch onto him. People like Fidel Castro, you know, Nkrumah, Nairi, Mahatma Gandhi. He gave birth to the ANC and Nelson Mandela.
Because he was a peaceful man. He didn't actually say, look, the only way you can achieve this is through violence.
No. He were the one that was advocating non-violence before, and these are all some of the things that Martin Luther King, you know, championed, because, like, he really believed that, you know, the time for guns and battle is not the way. It's about using your head, your brain. You know, he really encouraged people to get educated, and he was a self-educated man.
So the message was understood and respected by his followers, but I would imagine that for certain governments, they probably saw him as a bit of a subversive.
Oh, my goodness. Nobody could take him, you know, the British, the Americans, the French, the Portuguese, because he was anti-colonialism. And they didn't want to hear that. And to that end, you know, everyone was trying to get rid of him, you know, because they just saw him as a nuisance, you know, and he was stirring up the natives. Hence, when he was deported from his own country, Jamaica, to the UK, it was decided that I think we better have him close to us.
So he was actually under a form of surveillance as such?
Oh, constantly. They tried to kill him, you know, when Edgar Hoover was asked, you know, what is the greatest threat to America? It was Marcus Garvey and the Negro race. You know, what?
Which by our standards of today and in the later part of the 20th century certainly seems rather extraordinary, given that what he was doing was encouraging groups to actually look at themselves and to aspire towards greater things.
Absolutely. And, you know, some did and some don't. And for me, one of the remarkable things that Ghana is the first country to really took that seriously. And Nkrumah was very much a disciple. And if you look at the Ghanaian flag, it is the Marcus Garvey colours, because that was the colour he designed for the black race. And Ghana adopted that flag and put a star in the middle, which represented the Black Star Liner.
I mean, because this was the liner that he set up to, if black people wanted to go back to Africa, wanted to go back to the West Indies, this was a line especially for them, that they could actually board, they could actually go back to their roots, effectively.
Yeah, well, interestingly, you know, his flag is older than any African flag. It is older than any Caribbean flag. And, you know, it represented three things, you know, the blood of the people, the earth of the people, and eternity.
So there's a trinity. There's almost something very religious about that.
Yes, but it's also factual as well, you know. As human beings, we shed our blood in all sorts of different ways for all sorts of different reasons, you know. And also, you know, no matter what we do, we'll always return back to the earth.
Mm. You set up this legacy trust in his name and to really enhance his reputation, his work as a human rights activist and the general message. And you set this goal of trying to raise about $1 million to actually build these statues honouring the man and his work. I mean, it's a big target. How confident are you that you're going to hit it, and what's the timeline for raising the money?
Well, we're calling it a campaign. So how long is a piece of string? One doesn't know. But, you know, this whole thing was born out of Dr. Julius Garvey's visit last year, which was the first time he had come to the UK since he was 2 years old.
Just establish a connection between Drs. Julius Garvey and Marcus Garvey.
Yeah, that was my introduction to really Marcus Garvey, because I grew up...
But is he a nephew or a son of Marcus Garvey?
Son.
He's the son of Marcus Garvey.
Yeah, he's the second son. Marcus Garvey had two sons, Marcus Jr. and Dr. Julius Garvey. And he, in his own right, is a champion, you know. He's one of the top 5 art and vascular surgeons in the world. He belongs to every medical institution in Canada and the United States.
So he lived up to his father's expectations to actually do this, make a stand, be dynamic.
Yeah, and this was, you know, put into him by his mother, because, you know, his father died when he was a very young age. So his mother really put across, you know, the importance of, you know, you guys cannot, you know, destroy the Garvey name. You have something to live up to. But
and don't accept being second best either. You can actually rise above the expectations that people impose on you.
Absolutely. And
I was going to say as well that once you raise this money, where will the statues be placed?
Well, one will be in London, one will be in New York, and one will be in Toronto. And these are places where he did his greatest works. As to where exactly, that discussion hasn't begun as yet. And the reason being, we want to go to the authorities bringing something to the table, not going for an handout. And, you know, as Marcus Garvey always say, you know, you can only negotiate from a point of strength, not a point of weakness. And quite often, you know, whenever a black individual or a group go to any institution or authority, they think, they come in to beg. And this is his stance. You don't beg, you don't bow. And you look anyone in the eye with respect, and therefore you must always present yourself in a way that respect must be from within. If you respect yourself, others will respect you. Don't expect others to respect you when you don't respect yourself.
It's interesting as well that as we're having this conversation, of course, it is Remembrance Week, when we remember those who died in the First and Second World Wars, and of course in current conflicts as well. You're wearing your medals, and I feel personally, when we had our conversations off camera, that really you've also, your military career has really lived up to some of the ideals that Marcus Garvey expounded about being true to yourself, pursuing your dream, and where possible, making a difference. Tell us about your medals.
I'm an ex-British soldier, and I served in Aden and Cyprus, 2 active service. I guess my fame to claim in the military would be the Torrey Canyon. You probably wouldn't remember that.
It's a ship that sunk in the Channel, wasn't it?
That's right.
A little bit before my time, but I've heard about it.
Yes. Well, it was an interesting project, because the Torrey Canyon was the first time we've had an oil slick on a British coastline, and it annihilated Cornwall. And my regiment was given the task to clean it up after the RAF had bombed it. So, you know, what the strategy was, that we would bomb the oil ashore, and then we would just clean it up off the shoreline.
Right, and it's a beautiful coastline.
It is a beautiful coastline.
Stunning.
But what was interesting, you know, after we did it, you know, we did it in sort of like a rapid time. You know, we were working like 24 hours around the clock. And I remember the Prime Minister Al Wilson being interviewed on television, and a reporter said, Prime Minister, what about the oil slick? And he took his pipe out of his mouth and he says, what oil slick?
Eddie,
it never happened.
It never happened. It never happened. Eddie, we could talk forever, but unfortunately, time goes against us. But good luck with the fundraising mission, and thank you so much for enlightening us about the work and the record of Marcus Garvey.
And I just wanted to say, you know, this is the first public announcement about the project, and we'll be doing the official launch on the 5th of December. So if you are free and available, please come along, because we are making history while celebrating it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.